Hi, we're out on the range today, so please bear with gunfire here in the background. Today I've got Federal American Eagle AE-223J 223 Remington ammunition and Federal American Eagle XM-193 5.56 by 45 ammunition. Now both are Federal American Eagle. They come in this blue box. It has the picture of the eagle on the box. Both boxes are very clearly stamped American-made, military-grade 223 ammunition. Okay. Both have a picture of an AR platform rifle and the designation MSR on the box. So is there any real difference between these two ammunitions? Now that comes with a caveat that we are not discussing the difference between 223 Remington and 5.56 NATO ammunition. We're discussing the difference between these two ammunitions specifically. Well, the first thing I notice in terms of difference is that although the external diameters of the casings are the same, when you put the two boxes together, I see that the 5.56 box is about a quarter inch, about 6 millimeters longer than the 223 box. Now, both of them are boxes of 20 rounds. What's the difference? Well, the box of 223 is just loose ammunition in the box. The 5.56 NATO has this really nice plastic ammunition divider in the box. Evidently, Federal puts more care into the packaging of 5.56 than they do 223. But difference in the ammunition. Well, evidently the manufacturer thinks there's a difference. The 223 ammo has an advertised velocity labeled on the box of 3,240 feet per second. The 5.56 has an advertised velocity labeled on the box of 3,165 feet per second, 75 feet per second less. There's another difference in the labeling, and I want to read this. On the 223 it's marked mil-spec primer for best performance used in AR-style firearms. And the 5.56 ammunition is marked only fire 5.56 by 45 millimeter ammunition in chambers designed for 5.56 by 45 millimeter ammunition. So evidently the manufacturer does think there's some differences. But are there? And the answer is yes. When you look at the cartridges themselves, and I've just got two loose in my pocket, I don't know which is which, but when I hold them up, I can clearly see this is 5.56 NATO and this is 223. There are very clear visible differences. Even though the length of the casings is the same, when I put them together so that the top of the casing is equal, they both have 55 grain full metal jacket spear point projectiles, but you can see that the projectile protrudes from the 5.56 casing about 2 millimeters more than it does from the 223 casing. You can also see that the 223 casing is that nice yellow brass color, as where the 5.56 casing it looks discolored around the shoulder. It is. It's been heat treated. And in looking at the recessed rim of these, it's difficult to describe, but basically they look just a little bit different. So there are definitely differences between these two ammunitions. But is there any real difference in performance? Let's see if we can shed any light on that, and we'll start with going to the chronograph. I've got my chronograph set up at 7 yards, and I have my Colt AR-15 A2H bar with a 1 7 twist barrel. And we'll start with the 5.56 ammo. 31.96, 31.86, 31.92, 32.30, 31.66, 31.58, 31.79, and 31.61. Now let's see how the 223 compares. And now our 223 ammunition, and remember both of these are 55 grain full metal jacket spear point. 30.64, 30.64, 31.03, 30.41, 30.66, 30.85, 30.56, 30.87, 30.45, and 30.59. Now let's go crunch the numbers. Well, I crunch the numbers and it comes with 4 caveats. First, chronographs don't always agree with each other, and certain environmental factors like elevation and ambient temperature can affect chronograph results. Secondly, manufacturers' advertised velocities are sometimes optimistic. Third, whatever firearm or firearms they used to determine the velocities were probably different than the rifle I'm using here today. And fourth, when I was shooting the .223 ammunition, you noticed that the first two readings were the same. That's indicative that the chronograph may have malfunctioned, so I threw one of those out and computed the mean with the rest of the readings. So with all of that having been said, the results were, with the .223 a mean velocity of 3,067 feet per second. With the .556 a mean velocity of 3,183 feet per second. So even though they advertised the .223 as having a velocity of 75 feet per second more, I find that the .556 has a velocity of 116 feet per second more. So is there any difference in the performance of these ammunitions? In terms of velocity, I'd say yes. Now let's see how they compare for accuracy. Now, some people will say that if you shoot true .223 Remington ammunition through a rifle that has a true .556 NATO chamber, that you'll lose accuracy. Well, I've got two targets set up, and I'll shoot from 100 yards, and I'll shoot the target on your left with the .223, the target on your right with the .556 NATO, and we'll see how the groups compare both for size and location. Our group with the .223 ammunition is in fact about a ½ inch smaller than the group with the .556 NATO, so there's no loss in accuracy. But I zeroed this rifle with the .556 NATO ammunition, and we see that with the .223 there is a point of impact shift, which may be the result of the ammunition, and it may be the result that after firing this group, when I changed magazines to fire the other ammunition, I may have gotten into a slightly different shooting position. So now I've put up two new shooting seas, and we'll repeat our 100-yard drill, again shooting the target on the left with the .223 and the target on the right with the .556. But this time, I'll shoot the .556 first. So with our .556 group, we see that once again it's fairly well centered and a fairly good group. Our .223 group now seems to have shifted to where the group is centered, but the group isn't all that good. The reason for this group not being as good is one thing: me. This lowest shot, as soon as I pulled the trigger, I knew that was going to be a little bit low and to the left. But what we can put together from having done this drill twice is that from the 5.56 to the 2.23, except for what you can blame on the shooter, there isn't any significant difference in our point of impact or the size of our group. Now there's two more things to add. First, in the discussion of the difference between 2.23 Remington and 5.56 NATO, one of the things that I've heard people say and that I've seen in print in several sources is that although the shell casings of 2.23 and 5.56 NATO have the same external dimensions, that 5.56 NATO has thicker, heavier brass, giving it a slightly reduced case capacity. Now, I have never seen any evidence to support that conclusion, but I've read it and heard it several times. So in comparing today's ammunitions, I wanted to put that to the test. So before I came to the range today, I pulled the bullets out of a few casings, dumped out the propellant, and weighed the casings. Now, people will ask if I weighed the propellant, and the answer is no. I couldn't be sure that I could get it from the shell casing into the scale without spilling any, so in the interest of accuracy, I just didn't weigh it. But in weighing the casings, you'll find that there is a variation from one casing to the next. So I weighed 5 of each. And for the 5.56, I came up with a mean weight of 96.76 grains. For the 2.23, the mean was 96.68 grains, a difference of 8/100ths of a grain. That's well within the variation of one casing to the next. There was no difference. So it's highly debatable whether or not 5.56 NATO really has thicker, heavier brass than 2.23, but even if that notion does have any validity, it did not apply to today's ammunition. Now the second thing is, it is inexorable that today's presentation will generate discussion on the differences between 2.23 Remington and 5.56 NATO, so I at least have to mention the topic. There is a wide array of different conclusions and different opinions on whether or not there's a difference and what those differences are. On one end of the spectrum, there are people who will say that if you have a rifle that's a true 223 Remington and you load it with real 5.56 NATO ammunition, that you will destroy your rifle, you will kill yourself, you will bring about a zombie apocalypse, madness and pandemonium will reign. On the other end of that spectrum, and I don't like to mention people's names, but I'm going to mention a name today, there are people like James Yeager, who always put a slight disclaimer on it, but on multiple occasions he's said that there's no appreciable difference between the two. There's no significant difference between the two. He had a presentation that was something about 26-gun myths, and one of his myths was that there's a significant difference between 223 Remington and 5.56 NATO. The only thing I can say on this topic today are two things. One, are there differences between 223 Remington and 5.56 NATO? The answer is technically yes. But what those differences are and whether or not they're enough to make a difference is a topic for another time. But as far as comparing our Federal American Eagle AE-223J and our Federal American Eagle XM193, we saw that in the rifle I was using, in terms of group size and group location, there wasn't a significant difference. But there was a significant difference in velocity, and in just looking at the two ammunitions, you can physically see differences. So the bottom line question for today, is there any difference between these two ammunitions? The answer is yes. So as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the Federal American Eagle 223 versus Federal American Eagle 5.56 video.